Hey, a listener. Want to help us out? Leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or hit that like button on YouTube. Only takes a second on your end and really helps us out on ours. Otherwise, enjoy the show. You're listening to Cinematic Doctrine. Hey, if you just press play, you're missing out on 29 minutes of an extra discussion. This discussion is on a quote from Elizabeth Olsen that was in one of their recent interviews with In Style. I snagged the quote, though, from the Hollywood Reporter's reporting from Kathryn Shastel, October 22nd, 2025. And I'll just read the quote real quick, at least part of it. It was... this is Elizabeth Olsen speaking. If a movie is made independently and only sells to a streamer, then fine. But I don't want to make something where streaming is the end-all. And then continues, I think it's important for people to gather as a community to see other humans be together in a space. We essentially talk about like the differences between something being theatrical and streaming, why actors... what our audience perspective of watching as actors go from either a mix of the two, primarily being in theaters to then streaming movies, or maybe the other direction from streaming projects to theater, and just like what that looks like as people who watch a lot of material, like to follow actors, all that jazz. And that's exclusive to Patreon supporters. Pay $3 a month on the Patreon, patreon.com/cinematic doctrine, and you get access to all the digital benefits. You'll hear about other benefits as you're listening to this episode. I'll cut in with little call to actions here and there. But hey, you press play because you want to hear a movie discussion on the film Weapons, Zach Cregger's Weapons. This is actually a film that Patreon supporters submitted. Patreon supporters then vote on the selection of... They vote on what movies will be put head-to-head against each other. And then, between two movies, they decide who is getting reviewed at the end of the month. And Weapons was the one that was picked. So that's why we're doing this. So if you ever want to influence the show... hey, patreon.com/cinematic doctrine. $3 a month, you can then influence the show and get us to watch stuff. Movie discussions are simple. The first half is no spoilers. It's going to be 2 questions. Essentially, what did we think of the movie and what did it draw out at us? Don't worry, we will not spoil anything. The second half of the episode, the transition will be clear when we start to talk about spoilers. And we have 2 questions that essentially cover things like recurrent themes we observe, maybe some symbols, or just characters. What do we think about them? And then we get into the ending, because we always do, because that's what you do with movie podcasts. You talk about the ending. So, but let's not waste any time. I'm here with Cheryl, and I'm here with Kat. Let's get some quickie introductions. Kat, what's up?
So, I am ready to talk about this movie. I was really looking forward to trying to catch it in theaters. So for me, I'm glad that, as you had said, we are finally kind of covering this blind spot.
After watching it, I wish we did see it in theaters.
Yeah, I think it would have been a lot of fun to see it with an audience, and I'm sure we'll get into like more of our opinions later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad to be here. And Shirleon, what's up?
What's up, Cheryl?
Nothing much. Was it surviving but not thriving, or thriving but not surviving? It depends on how you look at it. I went into this movie totally blind, so it'll be really fun to
Good for you.
talk about it.
Let's start with this. Zach Cregger used to do comedy in the past. Whitest Kids You Know, very early internet comedy. Gets older and then starts making horror movies. He did actually do another movie called Miss March. And Zach Cregger will say Barbarian's his first movie, but that's not true. That is untrue. Miss March is his first movie, but Zach Cregger then transitioned into doing horror and came out with Barbarian, this movie that more or less caught everyone off guard. And when it came out in theaters, everyone just said, go watch it. Don't look up anything. So me and Kat text a friend. We meet up to go to the theaters. And thank goodness we didn't know anything about it, because it was a ton of fun. It's basically just like a movie that cleverly uses editing and nonlinear storytelling to go into some very interesting directions. It's also just thematically very gendered. And then all in all, it's a horror movie that has some good thrills and suspense, some absurd visuals that will make you laugh, and really showcases a style of filmmaking that I think Jordan Peele is also good at when it comes to cleverly being about something, but also very much channeling the comedy that is inherent to these creative men.
I remember it feeling like a roller coaster ride, which was something that I totally wasn't expecting. But I think that's one of the last times I can remember being in the theater and really being driven along with the story. The nonlinear storytelling actually worked out super, super well in Barbarian, so it was interesting to see that approach somewhat revisited with weapons.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing too. Like, the reason I wanted to briefly talk about Barbarian is because we don't have a lot of new directors, I feel like, if that makes any sense. So it's fun, not big ones like this, right? Like, it's fun to watch a director like Zach Cregger, who comes out with Barbarian, make a good movie. Barbarian is a good movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It is so worth it. But yeah, it utilizes nonlinear storytelling. It's funny. It's got some scary stuff. And then, yeah, it just has layers in a way that, like, I think draws people to it, which leads us then to Weapons, where a couple years later, everyone's pretty much seen Barbarian and gone, wow, like this was a good surprise highlight for October. I'm really excited to see what's next. And so did the industry, because he was able to shop around his ideas and then finally gets Weapons made. And to introduce Weapons, the premise is one night in the middle of this suburban town at 2:17, this collection of children run outside at 2:17 in the middle of the night and vanish. And there's two commonalities. One, that they all run in this particularly strange way, which you can see on the poster. And two, they're all from the same school classroom, third grade class, elementary classroom. And so the instigating event leads to this school being shut down. The teacher, who is a woman who recently moved into town as of 2 years prior, is being interrogated. There is one student in the classroom who did not vanish. All the other ones did. All 17 of the other ones did. This student named Alex is also interrogated. And then after a month, the school is just like, well, I guess we need to open back up, because the kids who didn't disappear still need to get an education. And so we then pick up essentially there, where the kids are still missing. People are still trying to find them. And where the opening scene is a town hall where the school says, hey, we're going to start back up again. We understand if there's still grieving taking place over the lost children. You can come to, we have counselors on staff, and counselors that are open not just to the students, but also, it seems, to the parents, is I think what they're implying. But then parents are also saying, we don't want to just go back to normal. We want justice. We want the kids found. And so you have Josh Brolin, who's in the crowd, saying, what about Justine, the teacher that moved into town? What was wrong with her classroom that everyone except one kid went missing? And so then Justine is turned into this pariah. And that's where the movie starts, is we kind of see what state this suburban town is in. The kids are still missing, and we essentially get the motivations for all of these characters to essentially learn, where did the kids go? You have Justine, the teacher, who is turned into a pariah but loves their job and understands that they are new to the town and now currently unwanted. So obviously they want to figure out where the kids went. Josh Brolin, whose son has gone missing, desperately wants to know where. I actually really liked how his character arc is colored. I thought that was actually just a really kind of touching and emotional direction. I thought that was neat. And then even just the township has reason to do this. Yeah, so that's the premise and setup for Weapons. Kat, since you were able to share about Barbarian, I will not start with you. Let's start with Cheryl. What did you think of Weapons?
I really liked it. I went in completely blind. The only thing I knew about it was the poster and the children doing the, like, almost Naruto run down the streets or something. I was pleasantly surprised. I'm glad I went in blind, because it kept me guessing the whole time. Like, I kept trying to figure things out. And I'll get into it more in the second question about
Like,
how it like made me feel. What did it evoke? But it really hit a lot of the notes that I like in a lot of the books that I read. And that was just really neat to see translated on screen, especially not from like a previously existing media, like as an original kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, my general thoughts on the movie are that this is obviously this year's big horror movie. I was reminded of movies like Hereditary. Weapons really feels like one that people are going to remember. The marketing was super strong on this one, so I think it caught a lot of people's eyes. I know that I've seen on Letterboxd a lot of people logging it, posting their thoughts on it. So again, I was glad to kind of cover this blind spot of 2025 for us. However, I think that this movie doesn't really land the plane for me. And without getting too far into it, I obviously was pulling connections between Weapons and Barbarian because I have a little bit of context on, Cregger's previous work. This movie, like Barbarian, chooses to work in a nonlinear fashion to tell its story. It also chooses to use a modern setting and to play with modern issues and modern cultural contexts. But I think that Weapons, in my opinion, does not as great of a job as Barbarian does in following its threads through to the end. I mean, maybe I'm really elevated horror pilled at this point, but I wish there was a little bit more for me to chew on here.
Yeah, I didn't love Barbarian, but I think it has greatness in it. And I think what was fun with Barbarian was that it was it was saying something while still recognizing that you don't have to take everything seriously, which in an age of elevated horror as people's primary personality, I am all about kind of the iconoclasm of doing that, of just sort of taking something and really saying something about gender like that movie was, but then also having just some of the funniest stuff I've laughed at in the movie theater, the consistent joke about the Kool-Aid man. That to me was so funny.
I think of the nose boop.
Yeah, that's just such good stuff, right? And I really feel that kind of letting loose was so important. And what was nice with Weapons is kind of that is continued a bit here, where this hook of the kids all just at 2:17 middle of the night just go running, and they all have this very strange way about it. Oh man, when the trailer dropped and I finally knew what the movie was going to be about, because no one knew. Everyone knew it was coming, was very excited. There was a lot of anticipation. And then it just turns out to be this essentially a weird fiction complicating incident of just something bizarre at a time that ought not be takes place. And that is cool. And so the hook is great. I mean, you can pitch this to anybody and they'll be like, well, I want to watch that. I want to, that's a great mystery. I want to see it. And so I think that the opening is just really, really strong. In fact, just the literal opening, which is kind of an exposition of the event itself, is just great. And how we are then eased into the first story of Justine, who's the teacher, I think all that goes really well. I also think the ending is just an excellent crowd pleaser. This was the point when I was like, I wish I was in theaters. We've just been so busy lately. So going to the theaters is tough. We go when we can. And lately, when it's October, I take off a lot of time at work because I have these blackout dates coming up. So it just makes sense. And that's why we could catch something like Black Phone 2 or whatever, which obviously I don't think either of us, me or Kat, were more that excited for Black Phone 2 compared to trying to see Weapons. But it's just how time turned out. But the ending of this film is just, on a primal level, very satisfying. And I would have loved to hear how the crowd reacted, because I know how I reacted, and it was just really great.
Yep.
And I think there's something wonderful about a movie sending the audience home happy, even if it doesn't necessarily bring everything together. I just appreciate that. And I think Barbarian was very similar in that way. Barbarian, a bit of a softer ending in comparison, but also pretty consistently very silly and fun and satisfying and crowd pleasing in every regard. And I think a little stronger and tighter than this. However, also, just like you, Kat, however, the middle of this film kind of takes a long time. and because this movie is set into chapters where we follow different characters, you don't really get invested much with the characters. I didn't find myself emotionally connecting to anybody, or if I ever was about to, cut right to the next character. And so I kind of found that a bit the movie's well made, and the mystery is intriguing enough, and a movie doesn't need to have every part of its self be perfect. But I think this makes that middle part more difficult, because now what I'm holding on to is the story drip feeding information. So I'm kind of just waiting for each chapter to get to the point where character introduces information or introduces information to me. So here's an example, not from the movie. I'm just explaining an example. Imagine you're telling a nonlinear story and you cut to a character and you're finally introduced to them, and they learn new information. But then at the end of their little arc, they die. Again, this is a fantasy. This is not from the movie. I'm just explaining like a narrative thing. That character might have learned new information and died, and your initial thought could be, oh no, like that was pointless because they just died in the end. No, sir. It's not pointless because you, the audience member, also learned that information. So narratively, there's a purpose to it. And this movie kind of feels like a lot of the pieces are just like a means to giving you more of those pieces of what the plot actually was. Like, why did these kids escape at 217? Whatever it was. Why was it just that classroom? Why was Alex, the one student who didn't go missing, why were they not included? You're getting like all of those pieces. And thankfully, like I said, the hook is good and the ending itself is good. But all that middle stuff, I kind of just felt it where I was like, all right, come on, stop introducing a new character to follow. Just give me, what's the movie about? Give me the movie. I want to watch the movie. So I liked it. And I laughed hard, and I think that's fun. And then, but I didn't really find it scary. And I found the middle stuff pretty like, just kind of, yeah, I wouldn't say I was anxious. Like, I wasn't like Jurassic World Dominion. Oh my gosh, terrible movie. That movie was like weaponized against me as an audience member, as I was talking with some friends earlier today. But like, I really was just like, come on, get to the point. Hey, don't forget, there's a lot of fun content missing from this episode because you're not listening on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support for $3 a month to gain access to uncut episodes with upwards of 40 minutes of bonus content each. You'll thank me later. So that's how I felt generally about the movie. I think that's a good segue then to talk about how we felt about it in terms of what it evoked in us, because I think that lets us get a little more free here. Let's start with Kat this time. What did the movie evoke in you, Kat?
I am on the same wavelength as you. I wish this movie was structured differently. That's the thing that it evoked in me, was this sense of frustration where I did not emotionally resonate with like 5 of the 6 different characters that we share perspectives with. I really feel like this movie would be more cohesive to me if it was linear and it didn't cut focus 6 times.
Yeah.
For comparison, like Barbarian, if I remember right, it's only 3 or 4 times.
It's like 1.5 perspectives, and then there's a backstory.
Yeah.
Because you start with one character, you jump to another, you get a flashback, and then you go back to the first character.
Yeah.
And like and so there's not actually like you're given enough time with the characters to really, I don't know, invest into them, and then they're together. Mm-hmm. So like it's just different. Yeah, it's just different.
And again, I don't want to totally spoil Barbarian because I feel like that's definitely worth it to go back and watch if you haven't seen it already. Another movie that I thought of that also takes this fragmented approach is Southbound, which is an anthology horror movie that basically encapsulates like a 24-hour segment from multiple different viewpoints. What works best with Southbound is each character that you cut to, it's a slightly different story. It's a slightly different scary thing going on. And you are never really going hardcore back in time. I think there's maybe like 1 of them or 2 of them that does that. But it gives you valuable information from the perspective of characters that you were not otherwise following. And it helps to make the world feel more fully realized through this. To me, like watching Weapons, by the time I started to even vaguely care about a character, it cut. And that was incredibly frustrating to put up with.
Yeah, and I would say there's like one time where, even though I didn't like connect with the 2 characters, there was one time where I kind of liked that choice. And there's a cutaway where we go to a police officer's story, and then like immediately after the police officer, we go to this like drug addict story who did have a run-in with that police officer. So there is a connective like tissue there that's a little stronger. But like, even that still, like I'm saying that, but there's so many asterisks with footnotes underneath that are like, but it still just kind of undercuts. Cheryl, what did the movie evoke in you?
For me, especially with the Justine, and actually the more I think about the movie, the Justine bits really reminded me of a lot of the psychological thrillers that I read. Something happens, with the main character, whether it's someone is killed or missing and it's directly related to them, a sibling, a mother, a spouse, or someone in their town, something happened, and they are just so invested in what happened to this person or persons that they want to figure it out, either because they are just super interested and they want to figure it out, or because they're being looked at as being the person who caused whatever it was. And they know they aren't the ones, and so they have to prove it, but no one believes them because maybe in their past they did X, Y, and Z, and it makes sense that they're thought to be that person, but like we know as an audience because we're with that, or not, because sometimes a lot of psychological thrillers are unreliable narrators, so we really have no idea. But then even as you get into the other characters, Arthur falls into that as well. The father of the son who's missing needs to figure it out, goes around to all the other parents to be like, hey, I need to know something. Can I see your Ring camera? Can I talk to you about this? I need to compare, figure something out, and then goes to try to confront the person that the cops believe did it. All very reminiscent of psychological thrillers.
Yeah.
Another thing that also fits in there is this constant jump to characters in different perspectives throughout books. And personally, if it's not done well, it's horrible. Much like we're talking about of like, you get invested and you want to know what's going on, and then boom, next chapter is somebody else, and you're just like, I'm not interested. Something interesting just happened. Now, if an author can do it really, really well, like you're left with that like anticipation of what's going to happen, but then you're also like, oh, but this is really interesting. Like maybe you're in the perspective of the person who actually did the thing, or I read one where you're in the perspective of like the person who was kidnapped, and so you're getting their perspective, but then it turns out it was actually 5 years prior, and you don't realize it's a time jump or
Sure.
it's a time back until
stuff
later
like
in
that
the
is
book.
cool.
And so like stuff like that is really good. And I think for me, and because I don't know what you guys read, if you read similar books to that with the psychological thriller kind of thing, this movie is very much like that. And I think it hit a lot of those beats really, really well. Could it have been better and cleaner? I think so. Especially like we're talking that middle bit. Like again, the Justine stuff was really, really interesting. If we kind of just stuck with her the whole time, it would have been fine. Arthur's bit also kind of interesting. I would have been fine if we got a little bit of him and then he paired up with Justine and they kind of went on a little detective adventure together kind of thing. And I liked it for that reason, because it was just neat to kind of see the same formulas I'm used to in my psychological thrillers, and then even horror. Actually, the book I will recommend at the end had a very similar. We're going to be in the perspective of, I think, 3 different characters experiencing this same phenomenon, but from their own perspectives and what they're doing about it. It's kind of what we see here. It's all their perspectives, except for maybe the drug dealer, because he's kind of the only one who's not really. He stumbles into it as opposed to everyone else being like literally impacted, but we get to see all their perspectives and how they're dealing with it. So in that way, I really liked it. But I definitely don't disagree with what you guys are saying. I think it almost kind of comes down to a perspective in a way of like how are you going into the movie and how are you approaching it from your own, I guess, experiences. Hopefully not with 17 children going missing, but maybe the other media you're consuming.
Yeah, I think of it like how J.J. Abrams, I think it was his TED Talk or something else where he's talking about the way he goes about storytelling is so in the TED Talk or whatever it is, he puts this box down on the table and then he just talks about other stuff for like 40 minutes. And then at some point he goes, but you guys are really curious what's in the box, right? And like, yeah, everyone in the audience is like, yeah, I am curious about what's in the box. Why'd you put it there? And it's a great example of how like you can very simply create intrigue. And the movie does that. But then the weapons, it feels like that. But then, just as I feel with J.J. Abrams' storytelling sometimes, I think he just gets away from other things I like about storytelling. And I'm fine with like going as far as abstract storytelling where you really throw conventions out and you focus on something and whatever. Like I find that enjoyable. But the focus on the mystery box here of the why did the kids go missing at 2:17 in the middle of the night? Again, great hook. And the ending, I think, is partially incredible and enjoyable because it's so explicitly connected to that hook. But everything else is just stuff in the town. And I just don't think it's as clear with what it then is trying to do with all that stuff. I think it just gets away from itself. One of the things mentioned on the IMDb trivia, again, not wholly reliable for information, but it's probably based off of quote interaction and it's some interview or whatever. But it talked about some of the comedy and how during pre-screenings there were jokes that were in the movie that weren't in the uncut because when it was screening, if nobody in the theater laughed, he would just trim it out. And one thought in response to that is, oh, that's a good idea because like bad jokes are worse than no jokes and good jokes are better than bad jokes. So keep in the good jokes, take out the bad jokes. But this is also a mystery horror movie. And it's not a horror comedy. I think it's a horror movie with very funny stuff in it. And I think, because Barbarian isn't really a horror comedy, I think it's a horror movie with extremely funny stuff in it. Whereas a horror comedy is like Dead Alive, where zombies turn into just slapstick humor. Borderline inseparable from Charlie Chaplin comedy. It's just if you made Charlie Chaplin very, very gory. And so that's horror comedy. These, though, don't feel like horror comedies to me. And so, because like Malignant is a very funny movie, but that's a horror movie. That is not a horror comedy. So, examples over. It feels weird to me that like one of the processes of developing the movie then was cutting out jokes. Like, I don't know. It's the direction, right? The director has control over the project as long as they get final cut too. But it just seems like a misunderstanding of like the material that it wants to be. Now I'm saying that as someone in the minority. A lot of people love this movie. A lot of people really liked it. Some of their one of their favorites of the year. Fair. I have like some other negatives, but I'll save them for the spoiler sections. And I had to write them down because I kept forgetting about them every time I would write my notes, but I finally remembered as we were chatting. But let me share what it evoked in me. I just think this movie has too many ideas. I don't need a movie to have meta text. I don't actually have to have that. I don't care for the term elevated horror. I think it's very tired. And then I don't also care for overly serious, borderline self-important material. I think once you become too serious, you kind of become self-indulgent, and I'm just not interested in that. So like I said, I like the borderline iconoclasm that Zach Cregger is bringing to horror right now, where he kind of takes it to this absurd level and you can't help but laugh. Like, it's just funny stuff. But where Barbarian, I think, felt clear with a lot of what it was trying to actually say and explore and then building comedy out of, and horror, Weapons, it just feels really bloated. And I think that's kind of where we all agree in terms of just the middle being kind of bloated. But let me just kind of list off a couple things that I believe I perceived from the movie. So it definitely, and this is stuff that other people I've noticed online talking about, it has some school shooting anxieties that are played metaphorically in the film. That's basically the opening scene and the complicating incident. There's the anxieties of like a town coming together and trying to process trauma, so town hall meetings. There's drug addiction in the neighborhood type stuff going on. I've seen some people allude to certain plot points being evocative of family sexual abuse. And I thought that was an interesting read. I see it. I didn't see it when watching it, but I see it as being definitely something at play. There's police abuse of authority, police frat club / gang mentality that's there, NIMBYism, so not in my backyard, the idea of like you live in your town and then it's a racist type thing. It's more, but it does play in part here too. I think a movie can be about all these things, and I think there are good movies that are about a lot of things, but they need to be a little more clear and they got to be a little better, and they don't have to be obtuse, and they don't have to explain it, and they don't have to exposit, but they got to be better. And I just think like why wasn't this a mini series? Like why wasn't Weapons like, okay, he wanted to be I presume he intended ultimately to be a movie, cool, but like it probably would have worked as a mini series in streaming or something, because like he clearly wanted to cover 6 stories, and like would just keep cutting away. And I think each of these characters could have had really cool full episodes. And I think that could have been really interesting.
Yeah, each one a different episode. And then they all meet in the finale or something. That would have been...
in some capacity.
I mean, to bring up another movie that does that fragmented, nonlinear storytelling, you and I both saw Strange Darling.
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant how it was layered.
Yeah, like the pacing was great. The perspective sharing and like what we knew as an audience versus what the characters knew was great. So I wonder too if in this case our bars are set pretty high, after that experience.
We've seen very good nonlinear stories. I think that's what it comes down to. Whether it's through shows. I mean, Arrested Development Season 4 is comedy, but it still counts. That's really good nonlinear. I mean, the whole Arrested Development in general, every episode's typically like that. And then, Strange Darling, not a perfect movie, but its greatness is in its editing and performances. Willa Fitzgerald is just like unbelievable in that movie. Yeah, all I have to say is it's all right. The movie's all right. Weapon's all right. But let's get into spoilers. I think we can draw some more stuff out here. So if you haven't seen the movie, I mean, it's good. Check it out. Like it's not great. It's definitely I would say a highlight in terms of intrigue and finale for the year. But if you haven't seen the movie, you can stick around. I mean, it's not like we're saying it's the best movie of the year. This ain't no Long Walk. I'm just saying. But not many movies are right now.
You may not know this, but the easiest way you can show your support for Cinematic Doctrine is to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. So press pause and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And then press play again so you can hear the rest of the show.
Let's get into spoilers. Recurring motifs and prominent significant moments and/or characters. I just want to say these two quick things before it's too late because I don't want them to vanish from my brain. So we're in spoilers, so I'm going to just come out with it. So Justine has the word rich graffitied onto her car, but everyone knows what's on her car. And she's like specifically told, do not go to Alex's house. Do not talk to him. You are not allowed. This is your student. You are not their parent. It's not appropriate. And then her entire story. Yeah, she's choosing to be irresponsible, but how is the town not just calling and saying something like, yo, that teacher,
That's a very good
she's
point.
at Alex's house. I was shocked that didn't happen. And it just seemed silly that okay, the film taking place in maybe the span of 2 or 3 days, maybe no one got around to doing it, but come on. And then the second thing, and this is what I thought the second the movie started, not even just necessarily that, when the trailer explained that all of the kids ran out of their houses at 2:17. And then even in the trailer, there's ring cam footage of it. So it's okay, so it's set in modern day and there's going to be camera feeds of this. How did nobody pull out a map and just draw straight lines of,
right?
Well, we saw them go that direction.
I thought that too, actually.
We saw them go that direction.
It took a father to finally do it.
More than a month. Yeah. More than a month it took them because that's how long... It's a month afterward, and then that's when the movie, cuts off into characters. And if you can get one line, cool. If you can get a second line, you can be pretty accurate about where they're located. You get 3 lines that are meeting into a location. Mm-hmm. That is all you need to find an average opportunity of where these students have gone missing. And in the title card of weapons, in the 0 is a triangle. And I'm like, okay, we're doing triangles. Sure. I mean, triangles are kind of an inherently intimidating shape for some reason. I don't know what it is about it, but if you also keep up with math, physics, stuff like that, triangles are pretty incredible. So I was like, oh, maybe that's where the triangles could come in. They're going to triangulate where these students went. Nah, dude, we're going to save that for the 3rd act. What?
Seriously.
You know what? This police force, ACOB, get rid of them. They don't know anything about what they're doing.
Right. They would have been the ones to do it. The FBI would have been the ones to do it. They even had
I would have done it.
That many kids disappeared too. I'm like, okay, is there literally any FBI presence here? That's enough for even state, at least state police.
I get it, guys. A school shoot, to be really crass here, a school shooting happens. And police officers were like, oh no, the door might be locked and I don't want to get shot. I'm not going to open the door. And for an hour, more students get killed. Yep. I get it. Police officers are not inherently intelligent just because they wield power and law. Fine. But come on. Because the movie, is it trying to commentate on police officers in a small town being dumb? I mean, I know there's a whole arc of a character where that's going on. He's like a deadbeat cop with a smoking hot wife who's sleeping with the teacher down the road, and then he's punching druggies, and and getting stabbed. But is the movie about that? What is the movie about? So
I feel like a good way, right? A good way to have like maybe explained a lot of that away, even to your point of like her car is everywhere. Why is no one calling? Give it the whole town an air of something is weird about this town. Something is strange. Maybe
Like
everybody and the
Innsmouth.
cops are in on it. Yeah, and like they don't say anything. They maybe don't know what's going on, but they understand that it's weird. Like maybe they can't figure it out, so they have to put on a facade of trying to figure something out. Or there's a bewitchment or a bewitching that has been done on the whole town to just not think about it. They're inhaling spores of something, like something weird about the town
Yes.
could explain that something, but none of that is the case. And I feel like just that could have fixed it, because then one of my things that I don't know exactly where this kind of falls into any of the discussion, but I think something that could have maybe elevated the movie a little bit is take out the drug addict completely.
Yes.
Because he's really the only one that's almost shoehorned in, because someone has to find the kids and he's the one to find them.
It does feel that way, right?
Yeah, I'm realizing
Yeah.
that if they take him out, Justine and Arthur can find the kids. They kind of pair up to figure things out after Arthur confronts Justine to be like, what have you done? And then something happens to her that indicates to him, oh, she's not the problem. Something else is. Okay, let's team up and bring our minds together. Hey, I have this map. Let's go find it. Oh, that's Alex's house, because she realizes it's that. They go investigate. Maybe they somehow know the kids are there. And then later on, the cop shows up. He ends up in the situation he ends up in. You don't need the drug dealer at all.
I like your rewrite here, because it also means if we start to like characters more, we feel afraid when they're in danger.
Yeah.
And as we're spending more time with maybe Justine and Archer, who at the start of the movie don't like each other. And I like that dynamic, because then it gives us something to hope for if they end, because they both have a mutual goal. They want to find the kids. So you can see where the story's going. Then you can get the moments where instead of our drug addict going into the house and finding the kids, maybe Archer goes in and is like, I'm going to go in first. And you still have the scene like at the end when Archer gets possessed and is trying to kill Justine. And then it's a ticking time clock between these kids tearing apart this old woman or Justine getting killed. But it's set up different, where Archer goes in earlier in the movie and then gets caught or something like that. And Justine realizes, oh, like I found his map because I know he's an architect. And like, I know where to, it's just, it's all there, right? Like it's all there.
I'm going to go a step further, because Shirleon, I was on the same like thought as you as far as like removing the storyline with the drug addict, because I'm going to take it a step further and say that we could have removed the cop and the drug addict altogether and still had a very cohesive story that was probably Justine, Archer, like 5 minutes of Principal Marcus just to be like, oh, here's what happened with the villain, and then Alex's perspective. Because I honestly, I walked away from this thinking that the subplot with the cop and the drug addict was really irresponsible and had like nothing to say that was meaningfully connected to the kid's disappearance. You could have done something interesting there, but like in my opinion, like I think that this movie just could have been totally cleaned up and could have had a much better focus.
So
if I could
just get some, I just wanted to set some pieces on the table here, because I think they'll help with listeners too. So like my thing when thinking about recurring motifs prominent, the stuff I actually wrote down, not the things I wrote quickly in notes because I didn't want to forget, was my header was like, but what does the movie mean? And I had, here's a bunch of metaphors and symbols. So have your pick. And it was weapons and the tool of violence. So the title, there's the scene that has kind of been dogged on, but I think it's like one of the highlights of the movie. There's this scene during a nightmare where Archer sees a floating gun above his own house, and there's like the 2:17 timer on it, which looks like a stat track from CSGO. So there's weapons there, and then there's small puncture wounds. Like the kinds of weapons that are dealt and used in the film are things like thorns, medical needles, and a fork. Then there's parasites. That's another symbol going on. So the witches and their influence. There's the risk of AIDS and other used needle hazards. And then paranoia and the impact of speech. That's a very parasitic thing. And then there's suburban anxiety. The first act built around school shooting anxieties and the aftermath. Then there's like the destabilization of a status quo by outsiders or external influences. So obviously the witch of Gladys is that. She's an external person who enters in and affects everything. But also they fear Justine, specifically saying, well, she came here from outside and she's only been here 2 years. So there is this blaming of an external influence. And then also local homegrown trauma. Because at the very least, Gladys is said to be the sister of Alex's mother. Whether or not it's the actual sister, who knows? Because it seems that Gladys is very old. Probably has been around for a long time. Even uses a term that a character comments is like, that sounds like an old colonial term. Like, that doesn't sound like a modern one. So I think it was trying to allude like, oh, Gladys has been around for a long time. So these are all like these pieces that are at play. And like, you can perhaps say, Kat, the police officer drug addict thing is some of that parasite imagery, because you have the parasite of like sin and social destabilization, and cops and police officers ought to be the immune system of a culture and society that prevent it, when in reality, they sometimes propagate it. But those are kind of the pieces at play. I just wanted to mention those to add some more stuff here. But Cheryl, what were you thinking?
Yeah, my counter was that, like, you can keep the cop in the story, but definitely take his storyline out of the movie, because I like the history he has with Justine, and what happens with them in the house, I think, is very powerful. But how you would do it is somehow Arthur and Justine suspect or do know that the kids are in the house. They don't want to go in right away because they really don't know what's going on. So they call the cop, who Justine has history with, and maybe they have enough of an amicable relationship that he believes her. He comes, he goes into the house. The witch gets a hold of him, takes him over. He doesn't come out. And then Justine and Arthur are like, what the heck is going on? We have to go in. And then we get this whole end scene with the fight between Justine and the cop. The difference in that is Arthur is then fighting the junkie, which is kind of a hilarious scene. In my opinion, too many times. The jumping in and out as he's like knocked out and then jumps up again screaming. Instead, have the principal there. Don't have him killed when he's killed earlier in the movie. Somehow the principal comes back to the house. And then when they get back in the house and Justine is fighting with the cop, Arthur is fighting with the principal, and then he goes down and finds his son and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that would have cleaned it up. We would have been able to focus on the storylines of both Justine and Arthur a little bit more. We would have had a small cutaway with Justine and the cop having their moment, so we can see what their relationship is. So it's not a big surprise when he shows up at the house to help. And then we do get that scene of the principal, because I think that is also an important scene, because he's talking to Justine about, hey, you're being inappropriate with the kids. And then Gladys is like, I can't bring the parents in because I'm now the legal guardian, blah, blah, blah. So like all of that can still stay in. But I think that would have just made for a cleaner middle, and you would have been able to have a little bit more meat put into Justine and Arthur, so we could care about those characters. We don't need to necessarily care about the cop. We don't need to necessarily care about the principal. But we could have really cared about Justine and Arthur, especially for the reasons they are trying to find these kids. We could have cared more about their end goal.
I mean, in hearing both of you guys talk about this, both Melvin, you kind of setting up the fact that the metaphors that are being used here are so scattershot that you can just kind of choose one and decide which one you want to interpret these characters through. And then Shirleon, having you basically like rewrite the whole of the movie.
Thank you.
It's made me realize how interchangeable these characters are, which to me doesn't sound like a good thing. The fact that really like our emotional through line here is like Justine, Archer, some of the stuff surrounding the school, and Alex. Like those are like our key pieces. But all the stuff surrounding the school is so scattershot in its metaphor that you're like, okay,
it's filler.
You're like, what's going on here? But then the cop and the like, I think really the thing that rubbed me the wrong way with the cop and the homeless guy was that I just feel like it's really irresponsible. Like you get this middle part of the movie that is talking about drug addiction, homelessness. It's talking about like how like this community ostensibly has like failed this young man, and then you have like police violence that's played as a joke. You have like AIDS scare stuff that's played as a joke, And then you're expected to go back to the end of the movie where you're like, oh yeah, that's right. The whole time this was a movie about why is this little boy the only one that didn't run away, and what happened to the 17 other kids, and is Justine really to blame, or is there someone else to blame? Like it's for me, it felt so irresponsible with the topics that it chose to use that it made it even more frustrating to me that like it took up like a big chunk in the middle of the movie.
And you can tell that it's channeling more of the comedy with those two scenes. And I think Zach Cregger needs to learn some discipline with that comedy. I think Barbarian's very funny, and a lot of that comedy is situational. And I actually think a lot of the comedy here is also situational. But you can't just do a section primarily as comedy. It just doesn't work. I'm not gonna belabor it anymore, but that's what I had.
Enjoying this episode? Grab that share link and tell your friends. Word of mouth is the most effective way for a podcast to reach new listeners, so don't be shy. Share the episode wherever you can.
Before getting into the ending, Kat, I know you had like thoughts on the contrast between Aunt Gladys and Justine. I was really curious to hear about those.
So, I mean, I think this is honestly the strongest part of the movie that stood out to me. I thought it was interesting that our setup with Justine is that she's at the center of a literal witch hunt within her community. The principal tells Justine in this quick cutaway, you know, her conduct's been inappropriate with students. Like, oh, why did you hug that kid when he was crying? Why did you give that little girl a ride home when she missed the bus? Like, that's not appropriate. And in my mind, I'm like, no, that's ostensibly like not really a bad thing to do for a kid, to comfort them, to make sure they get home safe. But, you know, we see even more so like Archer is absolutely livid at Justine. He's directing all of her anger at her and believes that in a way, Justine and this educational institution is the thing that's doing the harm to his son. You know, Justine has a lot of things wrong with her. Like, she's an alcoholic, she's an adulterer, she's new to town, so people don't really trust her. But at the end of the day, Justine is not the reason why the kids ran away. She hasn't done any harm to them. But we have Aunt Gladys, who positions herself as being harmless. This elderly, distant relative that's in town, she has needs, she needs help, she's weak. And she contorts herself to this image of what she wants people to see. Something that I thought was interesting is that her character design really plays on this inverse of the idea that an older woman, in order to be presentable, has to be someone who's dressing conservatively in your nice browns and beiges and whites, and, you know, does their makeup in a way that makes it look like they're wearing no makeup, you know, and holding themselves in a distinguished type of way. But Aunt Gladys's costuming is like so over the top, you know, playing on this idea of like a woman who doesn't like know how to act her age. She's wearing these bright colors. You can like smell like the Avon and the cigarettes like flowing out of her and her thick cakey makeup.
Very cool design, by the way.
Yeah, so I mean, like she's using these like unassuming feminine traits to make people not suspect her, you know, but actually she's harming everyone that she comes into contact with. She's the actual problem, and it's not the school, which like Justine represents. It's actually the home, which is what Gladys represents, that's doing the harm to Alex and doing the harm to the community. So that to me was like the strongest thing that came through in the play with the characters. I don't know if you guys were picking up on any of that, or if you had like similar thoughts or different thoughts.
So when mentioning what did the movie evoke in you section, I mentioned the through line of some people observing family sexual abuse as displayed through metaphor in this movie. And the stuff you described with Gladys is that, where instead of the external thing affecting the kids, it was the internal thing in their homes. And some people have observed that the relationship that Gladys has with Alex, obviously not sexual in the movie by any means, but the type of violent speech she uses with Alex to control him is very similar to what has been observed and studied in abusers of children who are within like family units. And with that in mind, like it adds like it connects better with the hook, that through line. And like you said, like this contrast between the two is interesting and more strong than anything else. Because if Archer is then looking for his son, Archer is one of the ones who is antagonizing Justine. So that's in relation to this observed theme that you're getting, which is between the contrast of these two women. The young, unassuming, possibly immature and irresponsible, but very caring teacher versus the older, wizened, self-efficient witch who does not mind putting herself first in any regard, even before children. So, yeah, I wish the movie was about that. I wish the movie did more of that. And I think these are really cool things to explore. Barbarian wasn't about a social thing. The stuff about gender in Barbarian was very intimate, very individual, kind of one-to-one. It was very, but it was also broad because it was just like men, women. These were like the two categories and how they kind of interact. But this movie wants to have some of that town stuff. It's going to jump around to 7 different perspectives, 6 different perspectives, 6, 7. Then it's going to have to like make some commentary on a town, but then it don't. But yeah, what do you think, Cheryl?
I find that actually a really fascinating look at the two characters, just like almost pitting one woman against another, even though most of the town really, I would say probably no one in the town really knows anything about Gladys until she dies horribly. So they don't realize that they are pitting one woman against another. But it's interesting, Mel, because we talked about Blair Witch, and you had the whole idea of it being a very, if I'm correct, a very misogynistic kind of movie. I
saw it as a feminist kind of read.
A feminist, yes.
Yeah.
And so in this one, it's again like, well, like got to point to the woman in a way, and like she's overly caring, so that means she definitely did this. But yeah, like as soon as something goes wrong, you look at that person because they hug their children in the classroom or whatever, and it's like it's just weird. But then you do get this like crazy witch of a woman, and it's no one's paying attention to her. Like she's the one acting I think she was acting very weird with the principal when she met with him originally. And it's like, well, why aren't we looking at her? She's she's brand new to the town, not on the kids, on Alex's like emergency contact, like who he can go home with. Why are we not looking into her more? And maybe that's part of her little magic-y thing.
Yeah.
But I did want to say that I actually really like Gladys as a character. I think she was great. I thought she was hilarious. The actress is wonderful.
For all the general criticism we have, I mean, Gladys is a highlight. Like,
dude, she's great.
And like, props to Cregger. Like, I think what's frustrating here is I like the characters here. I like the character of the cop and even the druggie. I kind of liked how all these guys were just layered. I feel like they're all full. Which I think speaks to it being bloated because they don't have time to breathe, and I wish they did.
It's honestly where a TV series like a mini series would have really worked. Like this is one where I think we all agree the story is great, the premise is great, the characters are great, but maybe not in this format. Maybe translate it back into a TV show and everyone has their own little episodes. Maybe towards the end, they start interacting with each other a little bit more. And then in the finale, they all interact together rather than shoehorning it into however long this movie was, where you can't get enough with each thing.
Hey there, listener. Want to influence the podcast? Head on over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support the show for $3 a month. In doing so, you'll be able to vote on a movie poll that picks a film we discuss each month. So jump on over there and have your voice heard.
Yeah, well, let's get into the ending. So just to give the, description of it, Archer and Justine figure out that Alex's house is where all the kids are hiding. At least that's where they all had walked. That's what they figure out when they do the thing that I said that I saw it at the beginning of the movie, where you geolocate or whatever the term is. They do that, and they break in, and there's people who are possessed, so they end up fighting them. Characters die, not just Dean and Archer. Alex ends up having seen Gladys do this ritual to control people multiple times. He actually grabs a bowl, and then he grabs one of the thorns from this tree that Gladys has all the time, and does the ritual himself, but with one of Gladys's items. And it's essentially whatever it does. Essentially, when he does the ritual, all the kids were in the basement. They were all just there.
Mm-hmm.
But he ends up causing all of the kids to chase Gladys, because whatever he did essentially told the kids, go kill Gladys. All 17 of them.
Yep.
So Gladys very quickly realizes this. And in the audience, you also realize this. It's very funny. And she's like, oh no. And she's not in her makeup and everything. So it just looks like an old woman begins sprinting out the house. And then 17 kids all screaming like they just saw, like, I don't know, Mickey Mouse at the Disney theme park start sprinting out the house, but not just through the door, but through the windows and glasses everywhere. And so then you get this long scene that is very funny of Gladys running through people's houses and yards and all over. And the kids are breaking down fences and jumping through homes, knocking stuff over.
So great.
It's like, all right, this is where we were going. This is worth it. Thank you for making this payoff so worth it. And finally, one of the kids is a great tracking shot of just like right behind the kid as she's so close to Gladys. Finally tackles Gladys to the ground. All the kids dogpile. And they draw and quarter her
in a gruesome way.
And in the front yard, and a bunch of the kids put their hands in Gladys's mouth and pull, and her head just like explodes. It's so funny.
It is so overboard and over the top. So this was my experience. We're watching it. And my husband goes, there is karma at the end of this. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, of course, there has to be. Like, this movie is leading up to a karmic payoff. And I'm thinking, okay, he's going to set her on fire, going to hit her with an axe, whatever. I would have never in a million years guessed that this was the karma that she would get. And I am so thankful for that, because like we could have gotten like he sets her on fire, breaks the tree, and that somehow like sets the tree on fire and she combusts into flame, like something just typical and done over like all the time or whatever. Nope. 17 screaming children just bust their way through every house in the neighborhood. I think my favorite scene of that was when the guy's like mowing his lawn. He's got headphones in, but I guess he hears something and he stops and he just looks over, and Gladys, it's like between houses in the backyard. Gladys just like runs between, and then it's all these children and he's just like, what the heck?
So
and
funny.
it's just like yeah, I thought it was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, just incredible. And then all the kids are standing there, and they're kind of like half possessed because Archer ends up showing up and finds his son.
Mm-hmm.
And his son does respond to him when he calls to him. But the narration essentially says like they all kind of were a little different, and some of them began to talk a couple years later, and then the movie ends. That's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ending made me go, should have seen it in theaters. Like that. That would have been a great
experience.
I would have loved listening to the theater react to this. It's like when I think Malignant's a better movie, but like when Kat and I went to see Malignant, it's like the movie's good. And then you get to that third act and it just skyrockets into just like, it's so funny, it's so cool, it's just the craziest thing in the world. And like, I'm all for this new age of horror right now, where we're just going into like the combination of the slow burn and the slapstick to me. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Yes, please give me more of that. So, all this complaint about what's the movie about? I don't care. What it's about? It's about setting up 17 little kids chasing an old woman and ripping her apart. And you know what? Cool. So yeah, what do you got, Kat? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm over here like scratching my head going, there's got to be a deeper meaning here. There's got to be a deeper meaning. Shirleon kind of hinted at it with like the tree that Gladys has. I just, going into the ending, I appreciated the imagery of the tree kind of representing almost like this family tree, and then Alex taking the branch off of it and stopping like the pain and the suffering and everything there, and actually getting revenge on Gladys. again, for me, like, I wanted so desperately to grasp onto something that was making a clear point that wasn't like one of 4 different interpretations. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was really hoping for that. And I liked the ending where Archer was able to be reunited with his son, thinking like, okay, maybe something better can come from this. You know, I don't want a Weapons 2, but for what the movie is, I think that it ended as well as it could have.
Yeah, you know, I wonder too if this is a case of possibly. I haven't checked online. I also went into this movie pretty blind. I knew the beginning, and then I think it was inevitable. Most of us probably saw Gladys on the internet. I mean, everyone was posting and I get that. Like, if it would be like watching us, like, it's like how everyone's seen Art the Clown. Even if you haven't watched it, like, Art the Clown's everywhere now.
Is he Terrifier?
Yeah, for Terrifier. And
I don't even know
Art
that.
The
And I'm like,
clown.
He was what popped in my head when you were like, everyone shares this, so everyone knows. I'm like, I've never seen Terrifier, and that was the first thing I thought of. Didn't know he had a name.
And with that, like, I think I haven't checked to see much about what people have talked about online for this movie. Did a good job avoiding spoilers and all that stuff. But I wonder if a lot of people also felt similar to us, where it was like, took a while, but man, that ending was great. Like, I wonder if it really is just the success of sending your audience home, like, happy. Because I feel like even the most curmudgeonly person, this would break you down into laughter. Because it's just like, I don't know, it's just great. So yeah, all in all, like, I think for me, like, the beginning's great. It's a good hook, good setup. Labors a little, gets kind of tough. That's the joy of streaming right now, though, is you can watch it at your own pace. And then that ending's going to totally be worth it. Watch it with friends. I think that would be really, really good too. I think this would be way more fun with friends. We probably would feel better about it if we watched it with more people. Want some quick updates on the podcast? Follow the Cinematic Doctrine Instagram for cool posts and story updates. Press the link in the show notes or search Cinematic Doctrine, that's one word, in your Instagram app. Oh, and we're on Threads. Check us out there too. Let's get into our recommendations and get out of here. Let's start with Kitty Cat. You said you didn't have one, and then you got one at the last minute. So let's start with that. What do you got, Kitty Cat?
My recommendation is a little off the beaten path here. I am going to recommend that people keep their eyes peeled for New York Times Cookie Week. Heading into the holidays, I know for myself, this is a time of year where I love to bake new things. I love to make goodies for other people. I love to hide some goodies here in the house. But New York Times Cookie Week is something to look forward to every year because New York Times puts videos on their YouTube channel with how-tos for the cookies. Normally there's like 6 or 7 that you can, choose from depending on what your taste buds are feeling up to. But there are 2 recipes in particular that I am linking here. One is a hibiscus spiral ginger cookie, which I really love. And then the other cookie is a peppermint brownie cookie. I think it's a little too early for peppermint to exist. Just it being the tail end of October here, I have some strong opinions on that. However, as you get closer to the Christmas season, perfect cookie for friends. Happy baking.
So I have 2. One of them is very quick at the end. I'm going to recommend to go along with your wonderful baking or your Halloween candy this month, because in my tradition of sharing a horror book in the month of October, I'm recommending A Lonely Broadcast by Kel Byron. I'm going to read part of the synopsis from Goodreads. If you find yourself driving down a winding mountain road near an endless stretch of pines, try tuning in to 104.6, the radio station that shouldn't exist. The village of Pine Haven has a secret of monstrous proportions. Evelyn McKinnon is a radio host who's falling on hard times, who gets a job at the radio tower when she finds out that it's more like a watchtower, and she's got to follow a number of rules, one of them being that when she sees the fog rolling in, she is supposed to send out a town-wide broadcast telling people to stay inside and do not leave their house until they are told, because there are monsters lurking in the fog. And it's quite terrifying. Very mysterious, and if you're okay with the level of gore that is in war weapons, you will be fine with the level of gore that is in A Lonely Broadcast. And then my very quick recommendation is a short story called A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck, where a man who is Mormon dies and ends up in front of a demon only to find out that the true religion was Zoroastrianism and he is now in hell. And he can leave hell when he finds his story in the Tower of Babylon, which is filled with every single book that has been written or will be written, and he has to find his story to be able to leave. It is very, very fun.
And then I'm going to recommend something called the WNUF Halloween Special. The premise is it's a local broadcast station, WNUF, holding a Halloween special wherein a local television reporter, Frank Stewart, is going to enter a local haunted house whose murderous history has left it vacant for years. And along with him is 2 paranormal investigators and their cat. Frank will then have viewers bring the viewers inside with him during this live broadcast, and they will hold a call-in seance and figure out, is it really haunted? The whole conceit of this project is to make it feel kind of like resurfaced media. The film is edited like someone set their VCR to record on Halloween 1987. There's commercials. There are so many commercials. And they're all very authentic feeling. Like it's quite impressive. Now, I grew up in the early 2000s. I was born 95, so we'll call my consciousness starting at 5. Really like 4, 3 or 4, but 5. But I still remember watching television, so I remember what it's like to watch commercials and be frustrated at the constant interruptions. And there is something really surreal about watching this. And not only that, although I was in the era of satellite and 480p quality, I'm still familiar with like low-res VHS quality stuff or live broadcasts. I mean, even early YouTube had super low-quality bitrate stuff. So the visual clarity, of which there is very little during the WNUF Halloween special, is very nostalgic. So much so that with the constant commercial breaks, the audio even sounding good, and then the general VCR, VHS type quality, Kathryn and I started the movie way too late. Usually we can endure that, but we were both falling asleep. This is a compliment, because it was so nostalgic for both of us to just be watching something, and like you would get like 6 minutes of the live broadcast, and then it would cut to commercial again, and it would just keep happening. And that lull of like, okay, time to tune out. All right, time to tune back in. All right, time to tune out. It's more a really interesting like art piece than anything. It is still this horror like tale, but WNUF Halloween special. I mean, this episode's coming out 2 days before Halloween, 3 days before Halloween, very, very, very soon. I think 2 days. So you got time to watch something that's spooky, nostalgic. I think part of Halloween is the nostalgia, and this one will be pretty fun, especially if you grew up sitting in front of a TV and not in front of an iPad. So check it out.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Cinematic Doctrine. If you enjoyed the episode, give us 5 stars on whatever podcast app you're using. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe, too. We put out stuff like all the time. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that thumbs up and leave a comment. It helps the algorithm share our stuff around, and I see them, so I usually reply. Also, if you support on Patreon, you could have totally heard this episode early. There's a bunch of other benefits to supporting on Patreon, so head on over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine to learn more. Speaking of Patreon, thank you so much to our Art House Theater tier Patreon supporters. Thanks, Thomas, Shirleon, Mom, and Dad. Your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, stay cool.